What would you do if the love of your life came with a family that saw you as nothing more than the dirt beneath their perfectly polished shoes? I was about to find out, and the night they threw me out of their mansion was the night I learned that sometimes the most powerful people are the ones who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty. Before we dive into this story of ultimate vindication, I have to ask you, what's the most judgmental or snobbish behavior you've ever witnessed? Have you ever been looked down on for what you do? Let me know in the comments. And if you love stories where the underdog gets a stunning victory, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more. You won't want to miss how this one ends. The phone call with my girlfriend, Elena, was supposed to be a final, reassuring pep talk. Instead, it felt like a surgeon was prepping me for a high-risk operation with a list of everything that could go catastrophically wrong. I stood in the small, familiar chaos of my workshop, the scent of sawdust and lemon oil a comforting blanket, but my hands, usually so steady and sure when holding a chisel, were trembling. I was already sweating in my one and only suit, a slightly too tight navy number I'd bought for a friend's wedding 2 summers ago. Elena's voice on the other end was a tight, frantic whisper, as if her parents, the formidable Alistair and Genevieve Sterling, might be listening through the walls of their Bel Air estate.
"Okay, Ben," she said, her words coming in a rushed, anxious stream. "Just remember the script. When my father asks what you do not say you're a carpenter. You say you're in artisanal structural design and heritage restoration. And if my mother comments on your calluses, you tell her you've taken up competitive rock climbing, a hobby for building discipline. Whatever you do not mention wood shavings, shellac, or hand planing." "Elena, sweetheart," I said, trying to inject a note of calm humor into my voice. "I build furniture. It's honest work. I'm good at it. I thought you loved that about me." "I do," she whispered, and I could hear the genuine pain in her voice. The strain of being caught between the world she came from and the man she'd chosen. "I love everything about you, but they're from a different planet, Ben. They won't see the artistry. They'll just see the sawdust. Just for me, Ben, just for tonight. Can you please just play the part?" I sighed, the sound swallowed by the tall stacks of oak and walnut leaning against my workshop wall. I would have walked through fire for Elena. Pretending to be a corporate clone for one evening to impress her insufferably snobby parents, Alistair and Genevieve Sterling, was a small price to pay. I'd never met them, but I knew their type. Their world was one of silent auctions, board memberships, and a quiet, absolute contempt for anyone who didn't speak the unspoken language of old money. And I, a man whose fingerprints were permanently etched with the ink of varnish and whose soul was stained with the grain of real wood, was the living, breathing embodiment of everything they despised.
I spent a full 15 minutes at the sink, scrubbing my hands with a pumice stone and lemon juice until they were raw and pink. A futile attempt to erase the very evidence of my passion, my skill, my life. I looked at myself in the smudged mirror. The suit felt like a costume. The collar of the shirt like a noose. I walked out to my truck, a faithfully restored 1970 Ford F-100, a vehicle I'd brought back from rust and neglect with my own 2 hands. It was clean, gleaming hunter green, a point of immense pride. But pulling up to the Sterling estate in it felt like arriving at the Oscars on a tractor. The drive was a journey through increasingly rarefied air. The vibrant, messy streets of my neighborhood gave way to sprawling, manicured suburbs, which then melted into the exclusive, winding canyon roads of Bel Air. The houses grew larger, set further back, hidden behind high walls and immaculate hedges. Each one was a fortress of wealth, a silent statement of exclusion. I checked the antique watch my own father had given me. A miracle. I was going to be 5 minutes early. A small, manageable victory. I allowed myself a sliver of hope. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Maybe they'd see how much I loved their daughter. And then, as I navigated a sharp, tree-lined bend, I saw it. It wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was a masterpiece. A magnificent, heart-stoppingly beautiful Edwardian escritoire, its dark mahogany gleaming even in the fading afternoon light. It was sitting, impossibly, awkwardly, on the gravel shoulder of the road. One of its elegant cabriole legs was shattered, and the desk was listing to one side like a wounded animal. Standing beside it, her posture a picture of elegant despair, was an elderly woman. She was dressed in a crisp linen trouser suit, a silk scarf at her neck, her white hair coiffed in a perfect, timeless style. She wasn't panicking. She was simply staring at the broken desk with a look of profound aristocratic loss. My mind split in two. "Keep driving," a voice that sounded exactly like Elena's hissed in my head. "You can't be late. Not today. This is not your problem. This is a test, and stopping is failing." But the other voice, the deeper, truer voice of the man I was, shouted it down. That was a George Hepplewhite, or something damn close to it. A piece of history, a tragedy waiting to happen, left on the side of a road. And the woman, for all her poise, looked utterly defeated. With a groan of resignation at my own inevitable nature, I slowed my truck and pulled over ahead of her. I killed the engine, leaving my suit jacket on the seat. The cool canyon air smelled of eucalyptus and dust. "Ma'am?" I asked, approaching slowly so as not to startle her. Her turned to me. Her eyes were a sharp, intelligent blue, and they took in my suit, my truck, and me in one swift, appraising glance. There was no fear in them, only a weary frustration. The movers, an oxymoron if ever there was one, they were meant to be following me. They took a corner too fast, I assume. I heard a dreadful crunch, looked in the mirror, and saw my poor desk being unceremoniously dumped on the roadside. They didn't even stop. She gestured to the desk. "I think it's beyond hope." I was already circling it, my craftsman's eye assessing the damage. The leg was a clean break, bad but not irreparable. The real issue was the weight distribution and the fragile inlay on the top. "I wouldn't say that, ma'am," I said, a familiar calm settling over me. This was my language. This I understood. "It's a bad break, but I can stabilize it. Get it to safety at least. But," I looked down at my clean shirt, my raw hands, "but it's going to get a little messy, young man," she finished for me. A small, wry smile touching her lips. It transformed her face, revealing a spirit of practicality beneath the elegance. "Young man, if you can prevent this 200-year-old piece of history from becoming firewood, I do not care if you have to use your own shirt as a rag." And so I went to work. I pulled my emergency kit from my truck, a box of clamps, wood glue, a small handsaw, a roll of strong twine. I shrugged off my suit jacket, laid it carefully in the truck cab, and rolled up my sleeves. The familiar feel of a clamp in my hand was a comfort. I talked her through it as I worked, creating a makeshift splint for the leg and carefully securing the entire structure. She didn't ask what I did for a living. She asked me about the wood. She knew her stuff. the difference between mahogany and rosewood, the history of the design. She loved this desk, and she was genuinely, intelligently curious about the process of saving it. "It's not a permanent fix," I said, finally, wiping my sweaty, now dirty forehead with the back of my arm, "but it will hold for transport. You'll need a proper restorer to fit a new leg and match the patina." She looked at the stabilized desk, then at my hands, now smudged with dirt and glue. Her sharp blue eyes seemed to soften. "Young man," she said, her voice losing its crisp edge and warming with genuine gratitude, "you have been my knight in shining armor, or perhaps my knight in a somewhat soiled shirt. How can I thank you?" "Seeing it saved is thanks enough," I said, and I meant it. My heart was full of the simple, profound satisfaction of a problem solved, a beautiful thing preserved. "You have a good evening, ma'am." "You as well," she said. Her gaze held mine for a long moment, as if she were memorizing my face. Then, with a final, graceful nod, she got back into her sleek, silent, modern sedan and drove away. I watched her go, that warm feeling of purpose glowing in my chest. It was a feeling that instantly flash-froze into a block of pure dread as I finally looked down. My hands were a mess, grime under the nails, a long smear of dirt down my shirt front, sawdust clinging to my suit pants. And then I looked at my watch. I was now an hour and 20 minutes late. The sun had fully set. The dinner had started at 7. It was now past 8. My carefully rehearsed apology, "So sorry, there was an elderly woman, a priceless antique," sounded ludicrous even in my own head. The cheap, unbelievable lie. These were not people who understood the value of a hand-tooled dovetail joint or the tragedy of a broken leg on a historic desk. They were people, as Elena had so painstakingly explained, who valued one thing above all else: the flawless, impeccable surface. And I, with my dirty hands, my stained shirt, and my unforgivable tardiness, was about to make the worst first impression in the history of first impressions. The Sterling estate wasn't hidden behind gates. Its entrance was marked by 2 ancient, majestic oak trees, a statement of quiet, unchallenged confidence. The driveway was a long, winding ribbon of pale crushed stone that crunched a deafening accusation under my tires. It swept through gardens so perfectly manicured they looked like a museum diorama, finally opening up to reveal the house. It was a monument to West Coast modernism, all sharp angles, vast panes of glass, and sleek concrete. It was lit from within, a spaceship of wealth that had landed amongst the rolling hills. I parked my humble, lovingly restored truck at the far end of a courtyard already filled with silent, expensive European cars. I felt like a stray dog wandering into a champion show. I sat there for a long minute, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I tried to scrub at the dirt on my pants with a crumpled napkin, succeeding only in making the stain larger and more obvious. This was it. I took a deep, shuddering breath, got out of the truck, and began the long, lonely walk to the stark, imposing front door, a massive slab of polished dark wood. I pressed the bell. A soft, deep chime echoed somewhere in the vastness of the house. I waited. After an eternity, the door swung open silently, and there was Elena. Her face, which I had last seen on a video call full of beautiful, hopeful anxiety, was now a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. "Ben," she breathed, her voice a strangled whisper. Her eyes, wide with shock, scanned me. My disheveled hair, my stained shirt, my filthy hands. "My God, what happened to you? Are you okay? I've been calling you for an hour." "Elena, I'm so sorry," I began, my voice low and thick with apology.
I was almost here, and there was this woman. Her desk had fallen off a truck. It was a Hepplewhite, or at least a reproduction, and I never got to finish. Two figures emerged from the shadowy minimalist hallway behind her, stepping into the cool geometric light of the entryway. Alistair and Genevieve Sterling. They were exactly as Elena had described, yet somehow more. He was tall and lean, with silver hair swept back from a patrician face. He wore a black turtleneck and a look of cold, analytical disdain. She was a vision of sharp, ageless elegance, her blonde hair in a severe bob, her black dress simple and devastatingly expensive. Her expression was one of bored, chilly revulsion. They looked at their daughter's horrified face, then their eyes swept over me. Their expressions didn't just harden, they turned to ice.
"So," Alistair Sterling said. His voice was a quiet, dry monotone, but it cut like a laser. "This is the craftsman. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, I am so incredibly sorry for my lateness. There was an emergency, a piece of furniture on the road, a woman in distress." Alistair held up a single, languid hand. It was a gesture of such effortless dismissal that it silenced me instantly. "We have no interest in your excuses," his voice devoid of all warmth. "Punctuality is the simplest metric of respect. It is the baseline, a baseline you have failed to meet before we've even shaken hands." Genevieve then took a step forward. Her eyes, the same blue as Elena's, but infinitely colder, raked over my appearance with a look of physical nausea. Her gaze lingered on my dirty hands, and a tiny, cruel smile touched her perfectly outlined lips. "Elena told us you were a man who worked with his hands," she said, her voice a syrupy, venomous drip. "How authentic of you. I see you've come straight from the workshop. How dedicated." I stood there, utterly paralyzed. The sheer concentrated force of their snobbery was a physical blow. I was disarmed, defeated. "I think it's best we conclude this introduction," Alistair said, his tone that of a CEO terminating a failed intern. He wasn't even looking at me anymore. He was addressing Elena. "Perhaps for a time when your friend can manage to present himself with a modicum of the decorum we expect." He then turned his back on me. A final, absolute dismissal. Defeat was a cold, heavy stone in my gut. I had failed. I had tried to play by their rules, and I had lost before the game had even begun. I gave Elena one last heartbroken look, a silent apology for not being the man they wanted for her. I turned to walk back into the darkness, the future I dreamed of with her crumbling to ash. But before I could take a single step off the pristine concrete porch, a sound cut through the tense silence. It was a sound completely out of place in this hushed world of electric luxury vehicles. It was the low, throaty, and unmistakable growl of a classic American V8 engine. A pair of bright, round headlights swept across the manicured courtyard, trapping the four of us in a sudden, dramatic spotlight. I froze, my hand on the railing. I knew that sound. I knew that car. A magnificent gunmetal gray 1961 Chevrolet Impala glided to a smooth, silent stop right behind my truck. For a moment, no one on the porch moved or spoke. Alistair and Genevieve stared, their faces a mixture of bewilderment and sharp annoyance at this interruption of their victory. Elena just watched, her despair now mixed with a dawning, confused curiosity. The driver's door opened.
A man in a simple driver's uniform stepped out and moved with efficient grace to open the rear passenger door. A hand emerged first, elegant and age-spotted, adorned with a single heavy ring of braided gold. Then, slowly, regally, the occupant stepped out. It was her. It was the woman from the side of the road.
Genevieve Sterling was the first to break the silence. Her voice was a high, flustered squeak, completely unlike her previous controlled tone. "Mother, what on earth are you doing here? And in that car? I told you James would bring the town car." The woman, Isadora Sterling, Eleanor's grandmother and the undisputed matriarch of the family, completely ignored her daughter. Her sharp, intelligent eyes, the ones that had watched me work with such keen interest, scanned the scene on the porch. They took in Alistair's rigid posture, Genevieve's flustered guilt, Eleanor's tear-streaked confusion, and finally, my own disheveled, defeated form. She began to walk toward us. Her steps were brisk, purposeful, and they seemed to make the very air crackle with shifted authority. Alistair and Genevieve, who moments before had been the imperious rulers of this domain, now looked like two teenagers who'd been caught throwing a party. Isadora Sterling stopped at the bottom of the steps, directly in front of me. Her gaze was direct, unwavering. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my glue-stained hands, the dirt on my knee, the rumpled state of my suit. A lesser man would have withered, but her gaze wasn't judgmental. It was appraising, like a master appraiser examining a long-lost treasure. Then a slow, deep smile spread across her face, a smile that held a universe of amusement and a glint of triumphant recognition. "Alistair, Genevieve." Her voice was strong and clear, cutting through the silence like a clarion call. It was a voice that expected to be obeyed. She gestured toward me with her ringed hand. "This young man, whom you seem to be in the process of ejecting from the premises, just spent the last hour on his knees on a dirty roadside, saving a priceless Edwardian escritoire from ruin after your supposedly premier moving company abandoned it." Alistair found his voice, though it was a strained, unfamiliar croak. "Mother, we had no idea. He was over an hour late, and look at the state of him." Isadora cut him off with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "The state of him," she repeated, her eyebrows arching with dangerous irony. "This isn't a state, Alistair. This is the evidence of a man who isn't afraid of real work. A man who stops to help a stranger, even when it costs him." She turned her gaze to Genevieve. "It's called character, my dear. A quality that no amount of money can fabricate, and one that appears to be in critically short supply in this household." She then turned her back on her stunned children and gave me her full attention. Her smile was now of genuine, warm approval. "You have my deepest thanks. You have a rare skill and an even rarer heart to use it selflessly." Then she did the thing that changed everything. She looped her arm through mine. It was a clear, deliberate public declaration of alliance. Her grip was surprisingly firm. "Come along, Ben. It seems I've arrived just in time to save you from what was undoubtedly going to be a dreadfully dull and superficial evening. You're having dinner with me." I walked up the steps of that modern fortress not as a disgraced carpenter, but on the arm of its queen. The humiliation I had been bracing for was over before it could truly begin, but as I glanced back at the pale, horrified faces of Alistair and Genevieve, I realized with a jolt that a new trial was beginning, and now they were the ones on the stand. The air inside was cool and smelled of minimalist elegance. Concrete, glass,
and the faint, expensive scent of white orchids. A man in a dark suit, the steward, I presumed, stood in the vast, echoing foyer. His eyes flicked to my stained clothes with a flash of professional horror, but it was instantly wiped away into blank neutrality when he saw Isadora. "Madam Isadora, you've returned early." "I have, Charles," she said, her voice brisk and cheerful. "This is Mr. Ben Carter. Please set another place at the table, right next to me." The man's eyes widened a fraction, the seat next to the matriarch. I would later learn it was a position Alistair had spent decades trying to earn. We were followed into the house by the silent, shell-shocked trio. Alistair and Genevieve trailed behind us like scolded children. Elena followed, her face a beautiful canvas of dawning awe and suppressed, joyous disbelief. Isadora led me into the dining room. It was a stark, breathtaking space with a wall of glass overlooking the illuminated city below. The table was a long, sleek slab of polished black marble, set with minimalist china and crystal that looked too delicate to touch. It was set for a party of 12, though only 5 of us were there. She guided me to the seat of honor. I sat, feeling like a lumberjack who'd been mistaken for a king. The dinner that followed was the most surreal and satisfying experience of my life. It wasn't a meal, it was a masterclass in psychological warfare, with Isadora as the gentle but ruthless general. She ignored her children completely. Her entire focus was a laser beam directed at me. She did not ask about my financial prospects or my family background. She asked about me. "So, Ben," she began, after Charles had poured us a pale, chilled white wine, "an Edwardian desk, mahogany, with satinwood inlay. The glue joints on the drawer runners would be hide-based, original to the period. What's the greatest challenge in making a repair that is both structurally sound and historically respectful?"
And so I told her. I forgot about the suit, the snobbery, the audience. I spoke from my soul. I talked about the patience of matching grain, the ethics of restoration versus replacement, the unique joy of feeling the ghost of the original craftsman in the work. I spoke not as a manual laborer, but as an artist and a historian. And she listened, her sharp eyes never leaving my face, asking insightful, knowledgeable questions, her interest utterly genuine. At one point, Alistair, visibly bristling at his own irrelevance, tried to interject. "Speaking of assets, Mother," he began, his voice too loud for the quiet room. "The market for mid-century modern pieces is becoming incredibly volatile." Isadora cut him off without even looking his way. "Alistair, please," she said, her tone cool. "We are discussing things of actual substance and beauty tonight, not speculative markets. Ben is a man who creates tangible value, a concept that seems to be fading from memory in this family." The verbal slap was so precise, so effortless, that Alistair physically recoiled. He spent the rest of the meal in a sullen, defeated silence. Later, Genevieve made a desperate attempt. "The branzino is exquisite, isn't it, Mother? Flown in from the Mediterranean this morning." She took a small bite, chewed thoughtfully, and then looked at me. "It's adequate," she conceded, "but you know, Ben, the smell of fresh-cut cedar, the feel of a perfectly planed board, that is a more satisfying feast for the senses than any imported fish. Don't you agree?" "Yes, ma'am," I said.
a slow, confident smile spreading across my face as I finally fully understood the exquisite game she was playing. And so it went. For the entire meal, I was the celebrated guest, the expert, the man of value. And they, in their own magnificent home, were the silent, humiliated audience, forced to watch the matriarch of their family champion the very man they had tried to discard.
Elena, across the table, just watched me. Her face was filled with a love and pride so intense it felt like sunlight. She was seeing the man she fell in love with, not just accepted, but vindicated. As dessert was cleared and coffee was served, Isadora made her final, decisive move. She looked down the long table at her silent children and then at Elena and me. "It has been a very long time," she said, her voice quiet but carrying immense weight, "since I have had a conversation of such substance and integrity at this table. It gives an old woman hope for the future of this family." She then turned to me, a new businesslike glint in her eyes. "Ben," she said, "my late husband, Elena's grandfather, was not a man of numbers and stocks. He was a man who loved wood. His passion was collecting rare and beautiful pieces of furniture from across the globe. His collection has been sitting in a climate-controlled vault on this property, untouched and slowly deteriorating for 15 years. No one in this family has the knowledge or the care to even look at it." She leaned forward, her expression that of a CEO making her most important hire. "I believe," she said, a triumphant smile on her face, "that I have just found its curator. We will discuss the generous terms of your new role as the director of the Sterling Collection tomorrow." My jaw dropped. Alistair and Genevieve simply stared, their faces pale masks of utter, horrified disbelief. She hadn't just approved of me. She hadn't just welcomed me. She had given me a purpose within their world, a position of authority over a piece of their own history. The carpenter they had tried to throw out had just been given the keys to the kingdom. The silence that followed was profound. It was the sound of a world turning upside down.
I looked at Elena. The look of pure, radiant, triumphant love on her face was a treasure I would keep forever. My future in-laws looked as if they'd been physically winded. Alistair's mouth opened and closed without sound. Genevieve was a statue of frozen horror. "Ma'am, I don't know what to say. That's an incredibly generous offer. I would be honored." "Nonsense," she said with a dismissive wave, though her eyes twinkled. "It is not generosity, Ben. It is pragmatism. I am saving a priceless legacy from dust and neglect at the hands of people who see it only as a line on an insurance form. You, I can tell, see the soul in the wood. That is a gift." As Elena and I were preparing to leave hours later, after a long, wonderful conversation with Isadora about the lost art of marquetry, my in-laws made one last, desperate stand. They cornered her in the foyer. "Ma'am, you can't be serious," Genevieve hissed, her voice a low, furious whisper. "You are not actually giving this woodworker access to Father's collection. It's our heritage." Isadora turned. The warm, grandmotherly woman vanished, replaced by a figure of such cold, absolute authority that the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Genevieve," she said, her voice like ice, "let me be perfectly clear. This family's heritage is not in its furniture or its real estate. It is supposed to be in its character, a quality this young man has in abundance, and a quality you and your husband," she shot a withering glance at Alistair, "have shown a breathtaking lack of tonight." She turned to me. "Ben has my complete confidence. He is a man of skill, decency, and kindness. He is a welcome addition to this family. You will treat him with the respect he has earned. Is that understood?" "Yes, Mother," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the floor.
Isadora's smile returned as she looked at me. "Charles will give you the keys to the vault in the morning, Ben. Have fun." The months that followed were a quiet revolution. Our wedding was beautiful. My in-laws were there, their smiles tight, their behavior impeccably, fearfully polite. Their terror of Isadora was the glue holding their civility together. The day after our honeymoon, I walked into the legendary Sterling Vault for the first time with Elena at my side. It was a woodworker's paradise, a silent, hallowed hall of masterpieces, a Chippendale tall case clock, a Louis XV bureau plate, a collection of shaker pieces of stunning simplicity. It was a lifetime of work, a project of pure joy, and it was now my responsibility. I never had to pretend to be a man of artisanal structural design again. In fact, Isadora insisted I give Alistair and Genevieve a tour. I walked them through my conservation process, explained the intricacies of French polishing, let them see me in my element, my hands covered in the honest, noble dust of my trade. It was her own sustained, brilliant, and perfectly polite form of revenge. One evening, months later, Elena and I were in the vault. I was carefully oiling the surface of a 19th-century Portuguese writing desk. The setting sun streamed through the eye windows, catching the dust motes in the air, making them look like gold. My beautiful wife was sitting on a stool, sketching, a look of pure contentment on her face. I thought back to that first terrible night, to the dread and the fear I had felt. I had been so ready to hide who I was, to contort myself into a shape I thought they would accept.
And yet, it was the one simple, authentic act, the act of a craftsman stopping to help save something beautiful, that had won me everything. My triumph wasn't in their humiliation, but in the profound truth of that moment. I had not been accepted in spite of who I was. I had been celebrated, and I had triumphed because of it. I had been true to myself, and in doing so, I had found not just a wife, but a champion and a new family, sawdust, flaws, and all. It just goes to show, doesn't it, that true character will always outshine superficial status, that sometimes the greatest power lies in the most unexpected places. But I want to hear from you. What's the most surprising twist of fate you've ever witnessed? Where has staying true to yourself led you? Share your stories in the comments below. And if you love this tale of underdog victory, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories of stunning justice, and ring the bell so you never miss one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.